Let's talk about digital sovereignty. It's this big idea that a nation can have complete and total control in the digital age. It sounds like the ultimate form of security, right? But what if the whole concept is actually a myth?
Because that's what we're going to dig into today. We're going to unpack the hidden structures of our deeply connected world and really challenge this idea of whether true digital independence is even possible anymore.
I mean, on paper, this is the dream, isn't it? A digital fortress, totally secure, completely self-reliant, a country that controls every single bit and byte that flows within its borders.
But to really get why this dream is so tricky, we first have to understand that digital power isn't just one thing. It's actually a stack of interconnected layers, and each one absolutely depends on the one below it. Think of it like this. This is the digital stack, and what it shows us is this chain of dependence. Everything you see at the top, like our data, relies on all the other layers beneath it, the algorithms, the systems, all the way down to the physical hardware. A problem anywhere in this stack can create a ripple effect that threatens the whole thing. So let's start at the very bottom, at the absolute base of that stack, the physical stuff, the actual steel and silicon that makes our entire digital world work.
Get this, an absolutely incredible 99% of all data that crosses from one continent to another flows through these physical undersea fiber optic cables. And here's the kicker, they're almost all owned by a small handful of massive private corporations, governments.
And that centralized corporate ownership? Well, that creates some huge vulnerabilities. It basically turns these cables into critical choke points. As the Snowden leak showed us years ago, they can be tapped to intercept or even reroute enormous amounts of data, which completely undermines the idea of secure, sovereign communication.
You see this same problem playing out with new technologies like 5G. On one hand, it promises this amazing new era of wireless freedom and speed. But on the other hand, its supply chain is incredibly concentrated. There's this deep reliance on just a few key hardware suppliers, like Huawei and Ericsson, which creates these single points of failure that are super vulnerable.
Okay, so what if we look to the stars for a solution? Surely space is sovereign, right? Well, not so much. We're seeing the exact same pattern. A single private company, SpaceX, now controls over 60% of all active low Earth orbit satellites with its Starlink system. And this isn't just a theoretical problem. We saw the real-world impact of this play out in Ukraine. Suddenly, critical wartime communications, we're talking matters of national survival here, became completely dependent on the policies and decisions of one private American corporation.
All right, so that's the hardware. But let's move up the stack a bit, because these dependencies aren't just in the physical stuff. They are baked right into the software and the protocols that run on top of it.
And this is where that whole idea of sovereign tech really starts to fall apart. You have the EU's supposedly sovereign satellite system, but it uses French processors that are known to be vulnerable to side-channel attacks. Meanwhile, India's independent space program, it still relies on licensed American chips for its most critical onboard processing.
Now, China's Beidou navigation system, it takes a slightly different approach. If you're a partner nation and you want to use it, you have to adopt Beijing's proprietary technical standards. This basically locks countries into China's tech ecosystem, just to make sure their own systems keep working.
And if you look back, history is just littered with examples of these vulnerabilities being used. You have the physical wiretaps from the Snowden leaks, the 2022 Viasat hack, where one single software flaw took down vital communications all across Europe, and then there's the ongoing risk of closed-source firmware that hides how our data is actually being handled. So if both technology and history show us that this idea of total, walled-off independence is basically a myth, then what's the path forward? How can a country actually be secure in a world that is, by its very nature, interconnected?
There's a quote from the source material for this explainer that just hits the nail on the head. It says, "The internet was designed for efficiency, not autonomy. Its core DNA was always about connecting across borders, not building isolated fortresses."
And that's the thing. Trying to build a digital wall around your country just goes against the grain of how the entire global system was designed in the first place. Chasing that fantasy of perfect independence isn't just impractical, it's a dead end.
So the source proposes a really fascinating shift in our thinking. Instead of chasing this ghost of independence, we should be aiming for resilience through a totally new model, competitive collaboration. This is a hybrid approach where nations, private companies, and even open source communities all work together to secure the critical infrastructure we all rely on. It's about accepting and managing our mutual dependence.
Now, this analysis is drawn directly from the book Homo-Servus, The Collapse of Human Sovereignty in the Digital Era. So if you want to dive deeper into these urgent and really interesting ideas, you can find the book on Amazon, or you can contact the authors through their website.
And that leaves us with one final big thought to chew on. In a world that was fundamentally built on connection, maybe true strength and real sovereignty aren't found in building higher walls, but in building smarter, stronger, and more transparent bridges.